Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to make sure we prioritize our time here. So welcome to our webinar today, From Vacancy to Velocity, How High-Performing Agencies Compete for Talent. My name is Alex, and I will be your host today, but I will not be here for the majority of the webinar. We have two amazing speakers who you'd much rather hear from than me, so I'm going to turn it over to them in a few seconds. But before I do, I just want to quickly go over a few things with you all. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to add them to the GoToWebinar chat panel. We will have dedicated time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions from you all. So please make sure to drop them there for us to see. A link to this presentation and this recording, the slides, everything will be emailed to you tomorrow. So if you have to drop off early, for anyone who was registered and couldn't make it, they will receive all of that tomorrow. So keep an eye for that in your email. And then lastly, if you have any questions after the webinar is over, you can always reach out to us at contact@powerdms.com. We'll be happy to answer any other questions, talk through anything further with you all. So we'll definitely look forward to hearing from you as well. All right, with that being said, I'm not going to take any more time. We've got a lot to cover today. I'm going to turn it over to our two amazing speakers, Doug and Nicole. And thank you all for joining.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole. I recently joined NeoGov as an executive advisor. I worked for a municipality in Wyoming for almost 20 years. At that organization, I wore a few different hats and worked in a few different positions, but most of my time was spent in HR leadership roles, and I'm excited to get started today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nicole. It's good to see you again, as always. Doug Shoemaker. I'm also an executive advisor with NeoGov, and has spent a really long career in public safety, 33 plus years at 3 different organizations, one in Missouri, one in Colorado, and one in Texas. And you know, we have so many challenges in the public safety realm, and this is one of the things that we really wanted to talk about in terms of who we hire and what we do throughout that career. And I'm sure Nicole will share some of her stories throughout our time together as we spend this today. There were so many things that we saw that went really well, some things that didn't go so well, and had opportunities to really engage on the hiring aspect of who we bring into our organizations at a city or county level. So today we're really excited to be here. We're anxious to share the time with you. I hope you have a lot of questions for us, and maybe even some great answers that you're willing to share with other folks that are tuning in, so we can all just get better at what we're doing. So thanks for joining today, and let's dive in.
So today, as we talked about, we're going to be discussing recruitment. And I just want to truly reiterate that you are truly not alone. You know, every government agency is unique. We have unique processes, unique funding sources, unique positions, but we all have very, very similar challenges when it comes to recruitment. And those challenges can often be very repetitive. Doug, from your experience, were there any areas that your department specifically felt was the most challenging with recruitment?
Well, there were quite a few, and you and I've talked, you know, for the length of time that we've been working together here, which has been great. But we've talked about so many of those challenges, you from an HR perspective and me from a chief's perspective, and from a hiring manager perspective on the police side. And it's funny how, as we look at this, it's not just our issue. And like the slide says, you're really truly not alone, because everybody across the board are having the same types of challenges. And personally, as you see on the screen, there's several things that are listed, like positions staying open too long and all these other things that are happening. And I think the one thing that underscores all of this is the importance that we understand that in the public sector, we're not really selling anything. We're not hiring salespeople. We're not producing some sort of object or something to physically sell to people. But what we are doing is hiring the people that go out and represent the organizations that we serve, whether it's in public safety, police, fire, EMS, dispatch, to Parks and Rec, to streets, to so many different functions that are critical for the communities that we serve, that it's so important that who we hire really represents that the services that our communities really truly need. And it's difficult to do that, especially in today's market. And I think we're going to dive into this. And again, Nicole, as you and I've talked before, as we look at what those challenges are, how are some of the ways that we've actually made some steps to address some of those challenges that have made a difference in the organizations? And I think that's what we're about to dive into.
Yeah, exactly. I think that public service is such a noble profession, and outside individuals that don't work in public service don't really understand the time and effort and energy that all of our employees are contributing to the organization, but also truly contributing to their communities. So looking at kind of recruitment from the HR perspective, I think that one thing that I've experienced a lot of is that HR teams often develop processes that work really well for them, but they may not always work well for the departments that they support or align with that department's operations. And so over the years, I've truly observed a lot of agencies operate in silos and have very disjointed processes with those departments. And so I think, again, in my experience, it's so much more efficient when HR collaborates with those outside departments and truly supports their needs. Overall, collaboration can definitely increase efficiency and communication. And then obviously rapport between work groups. HR can, often be seen as the principal's office. And I think that when you as HR are developing those relationships and truly supporting your departments, you're improving that culture and that relationship. And then again, ultimately, having all of those things in that collaboration improves the candidate experience. And I think too, a lot of the time, HR and departments can often focus too much on how unique the departments are. But again, when it comes to recruitment, we are still very, very similar. And we all have the same goal in mind, which is to attract and retain top talent. Doug, would you agree?
Yeah, I do. And as we talk about some of the perspectives from the public safety, what you said just now really resonate with me, and that we're all trying to achieve the same goal, right? And even though we work on our own silos, if you will, I mean, HR's here and police is here and streets is here and parks is here. We all work differently. We're really trying to accomplish the same thing. So from the public safety perspective, we know what we're looking for. We know what makes a really good public servant when we talk about police or fire or EMS or a 911 emergency communicator. And it's funny because it's evolved so much over the years. And I'll do the thing that I'm probably not supposed to do and say, back in my day when I started, it was so much more, it was harder to get on because the demand was so much greater. And as we look at some of those challenges today, the pool of candidates who have applied to our positions across the board has really shrunk. And I think that creates a more difficult environment to start in the first place. And we know when we see somebody that we say that person just gets it, we just have this sense that we know what that is. And I think we've always been able to define that clearly, like the slide says. The challenge is looking for long-term performance. Like, what is this person? How's this person going to best represent us as they go out and do the job they do within the public safety realm? And of course, as you all know, when we hire cops, we want to make sure that when we hire the right people, that they're not the folks that are going to end up getting our organizations on the front page news for a bad reason at some point down the road. So we have to make sure that we're taking the right steps, which are critically important to bring those folks on board that are really going to be the ethical, the moral, the folks that just sort of get the mission of policing nowadays. And it's so much more than what's in a resume. And as it mentions there, the expectations of employers and expectations of employees is completely different. And you may have the best candidate that has an average resume, but until you get to know who they are and really invest in them, it's tricky. And as we sort throughout that process and as we continue the conversation, as we move forward on talking about some of those challenges, I think we're going to really kind of delve into those particular things.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that you bring up that, we have the ability to recognize the individuals that get it. And again, I think that is going back to, are they truly a public servant, and do they understand, their role in serving the community, whether that's public safety or that's being a, water treatment plant operator and providing clean water to the community. We are always in search of those people who have that public service mindset and are here and motivated by essentially doing good deeds for the community. When we talk about missing the mark, What do you think that that looks like in public safety?
Well, I mean, we do what everybody else does, and we do our very best, but sometimes we fall short. And I think it's because there's been kind of an evolution of who we're hiring and how we go about doing that. And a few things on this slide that I really want to touch on are really talking about the candidate experience and then the length of the processes that we engage in that just sometimes can lose us candidates. And when we talk about the candidate experience from a policing perspective, I don't know that we've thought about much about this, because we think, okay, we have structure, we have a reason we do things, and this is the order of things. I mean, we're sort of people call us a paramilitary type organization. I don't know that I love that term, but what I mean by it is that that structure is inherent, and sometimes sort of, that's how we've always done it, which is another term I don't love, but we sometimes have a hard time moving away from that. When we talk about the candidate experience, when there was a Gallup poll that was put out this year earlier, and it was a recap of a 2024 Gallup poll that says the people that are employed within organizations, 42% say that when they left, that exit was preventable. And so you look at the people you hire, because ultimately you want to hire people and retain people. And when you bring them on with that first experience, just like when an officer completes a traffic stop and goes up and talks to the people at the car, that person will form what they think of police from that interaction. Just like when we have candidates come on board, that person is evaluating us just as much as we're evaluating them. And I think that's really essential that we take that perspective into account as to how we custom tailor that process to make sure that our experience individually is an unforgettable one in a good way. We want them to remember, this is why this agency stands out and why I'd rather work there than I would somewhere else. I'm curious to what you think from an HR perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really great examples. The ones that I really like to focus on is the misalignment, and then, hiring candidates quickly. Hiring managers often forget that there is a ripple effect if we pick the wrong person, right? And so selecting a candidate too quickly, meaning they might not have the right experience, or they might not necessarily have the right personality traits to fit into our work group, can create a lot of work after the fact if they're having performance or behavioral issues. And so then we're kind of going backwards, right? We put this person in the seat to make progress on our team, and then we realize maybe we didn't do our due diligence to check references and see how they respond to conflict. Or did they really have the experience that they put on their resume? And now we're spending a lot of time trying to develop them to get to the level that we needed them to be at when they started. And so I know that there can be a lot of pressure when it comes to being quick about hiring positions, especially depending on the level of position or kind of maybe the morale and workload of the work group. But I really encourage hiring managers all the time to take their time and do their due diligence to select the right person. Ultimately, I can give so many examples of personnel matters that have stemmed from simply choosing the wrong person. And again, that helps, or that forces managers to go backwards versus make progress. And so my overall guidance when it comes to hiring, even though that there is external pressures, is to take your time and pick the right candidate for the position that you have vacant.
One thing before we go to the next slide, I know we've got this slide, let's keep it up. But one thing I think, and you brought this up, that just made me think about it. Our processes they're not inexpensive to have, right? I mean, there's the time that you go through to really invest from a staffing perspective, what goes into this, the advertising, all the things. And then when you hire people, the training, all the other components that go into it too. I mean, this is not an inexpensive process for local communities that don't have unlimited budgets too. So yeah, I think this is really quite important to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And to build on that, what is the impact to the work group when we have long-term vacancies, right? That really impacts, their workload, the services provided to the community, and then overall morale and burnout. If we're taking a really long time, that has an impact on them. But I think it's very important for hiring managers to talk to their work groups and explain why we haven't filled those vacancies, and not let those individuals, more the frontline employees, think that maybe managers aren't doing their job, or maybe we aren't getting enough applicants, and truly communicate to them I'm doing my due diligence to pick the right person for the seat, to pick your best teammate. And that might take longer than expected, but that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. And when we talk about, this slide brings up, two terms, clarity and friction. And I love that that's in here, because when we have, HR and we have police, sometimes we don't always see eye to eye on things, because maybe we feel like we have different missions or goals, but truly we're trying to do the same thing, just like we opened up this discussion. And I think back to the relationships between HR and police. And I think on both ends, sometimes we don't communicate well what our expectations are. We don't very clearly just have the discussion before the process. Instead, we just go through processes, and then sometimes, may not be fond of one another throughout the process because one's holding up here, one's holding up here. But the communication before is so critical. And I think back to my time when I was in Grand Junction, and here's something really specific that it sticks with me and resonates with me. I was an outsider when I came into the agency and took over, and the process really had some challenges to it. And I think it was such a long, arduous process for an applicant, not even for us on the police side, but just for the applicant to go through all these steps. And there were moments where the applicant really didn't know where they were. And in today's workforce, what people are looking for specifically are opportunities to have a streamlined process that's very simple, but also keeps them in the loop as to what's taking place. Where am I in the process? And so that's what we did. We literally rebuilt the entire process, and we had the conversations with HR to say, look, here's my end game. Here's what I want to do. Here's some systems we have in place. Are those necessary, or can we change them or evolve them to make them more candidate centric in a way that really make people feel like this is why I want to come here? And it's well beyond anything we put on a website or a job flyer or anything like that. It's literally, what steps can we take throughout that process to make that candidate feel like they're beyond just, I'm candidate number 15. I feel like I'm special for this process, and I feel like I'm being treated like I'm important. And I think at the end of the day, particularly with the market, and maybe you've seen the same thing across the board beyond policing, people want to feel like they're wanted, and they want to feel like they can contribute to something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you touched on, how we make the candidate feel and having those conversations ahead of time. And I think a vacancy is a really great opportunity for HR to talk to the hiring managers and say, hey, what are you looking for? What does the ideal candidate look like? What is your wish list with experience and traits? And how can we help you get there? And if you have that, ideal candidate wish list lined out up front, your hiring process just goes so much smoother throughout because you've defined that up front. And I think that's something that public safety is really good at, is they know what they need for experience and what traits they need for that individual to fit in their culture. And that's something that HR can really help departments with and collaborate with them to say, what are you looking for and how can we help you find that person?
Yeah, and that's a great lead into this. And as I worked with HR, and you and I've had discussions, and I've had discussions with other HR professionals, we've got to be open to learning, and we've got to understand their different perspective, different ways of doing things. And I talked earlier about the rigidity sometimes on the policing sides we have in the process. And I think if we open our minds to doing things a little differently and considering options, especially considering today's workforce, of how we can best bring in the most optimum candidates in any way possible that we may not see from a policing perspective, but our partners at HR can really help. I think we look at that candidate experience, and having that communication is really important as we as the police side learn from HR. But I'm curious to what you think about from the policing side. What do you think works best with us?
Yeah, I think I will reiterate, sometimes police can be rigid, but HR can also be rigid, right? So we both can give a little and truly work on being open-minded and learning from each other. But one thing that I think, police or public safety has always done really well is they have very strict and organized hiring timelines, because that's typically tied to, an academy start date or something like that. And so if HR were to work with hiring managers in other departments and talk about what is your ideal start date, and let's work backwards from that date, and let's kind of map out some hiring milestones. Let's map out, when do you want to be done reviewing your applications? What dates do you want to interview? Let's get that on the calendar. Let's pick your panel now, because sometimes we get so caught up in our day-to-day that we forget after we post that job, we forget to ask other individuals in the organization if they'll be on our panel. We forget to put that on calendars, and that ultimately delays the hiring process even more, which goes back to what you've been talking about with the candidate experiences. We want to be smooth and efficient, and we want to be communicative with them, right? And so if we're forgetting the steps, we're kind of failing at our end of the bargain there. Yeah, no, sorry, that's what I think we could learn from PD.
So as we kind of wrap this up a little bit onto our next slide, we can, I think as we look at the process, you know, I think it's really important as we, because we'll have some questions. I know they're already populating in the chat, and we've already received a few, but I think as we look at the process, we've just got to communicate better, and we've got to consider things that maybe we've not considered before in terms of how we move forward specifically on this just critically important issue, because we are a people-serving business. Most of our money, if not most all of it, is in public safety and in the people we invest across the board. The people do the work. So it's an issue that we have to invest in overall without exception, because if the people we hire don't do the jobs the way we need them to do them, then we're failing as organizations. So I think we have some questions possibly.
Yes, we do. Thank you both. That was very insightful. So the first question that I have is, how do I make my agency stand out when I'm posting a job? And we can start with either of you.
I'll take that one first. Yeah, I have a lot of ideas on that one, actually. I think that one of the things that we might not always be doing our best at is truly promoting the small things that our organization might offer or might do really well. So for example, my agency, our mechanics had their own bays that they were able to work in. And that wasn't something that we advertised, but when we brought in mechanics, they were so excited when they learned that they had their own workspace, right? And so something that we might not think about, but is very important to the candidate when they're considering our agency. I also really, really love doing like total compensation flyers. So many people that don't work or haven't worked in the public sector don't understand the value of the benefits package. And so truly articulating the dollar value behind health insurance or your pension, and even visually displaying, here's your wage, but also here's your benefits package and all the other little perks that come along with this position. And the third thing that I love on job postings is, you know, in the HR world, we often post things in technical terms and have very technical job titles that most people might not understand. But maybe when you're posting your job, you post a little paragraph, a day in the life, and what does that position do, and what are they responsible for, and who do they interact with? So they don't have to interpret that technical writing that is typically the job description in the posting.
I think the clarity makes a difference to that exact point. You know, what am I walking into? What exactly am I going to be doing? And when you look at somebody that, say, jumps into a 911 emergency communications role, a day in the life is really important, because that's a very high stress but high reward job that demands this level of talent that can literally save lives. So I think when we're very honest and open about those things, but I think we always need to look at who our brand ambassadors are within organizations. And I know that's not a term that we use in policing very often, but it's so important that when we have people that represent our organization that are out there doing the ride-alongs with potential employees, those types of moments matter, because not only are we evaluating the talent, you know, how was this person on the ride-along? What was their disposition? Did they look like they were interested? They ask a lot of questions. At the same time, they're evaluating the officer that they're riding with to say, is this the kind of place that I would want to work? Would I want to work alongside him or her? Because I feel like they believe in the mission. So when we have brand ambassadors, and I just think it's such an important aspect that we sometimes don't think about, but I think it's critical to our success.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. We have another question here. So our HR team can be difficult to work with. How can we improve the relationship to work together better?
Yeah, I'll start off with this, because I've admittedly had some challenges here and there, and I'm sure if you had them on, they would say, yeah, there were some challenges, but I think it comes back to conversations and just having a setting of expectations. We mentioned it earlier specifically about how do we improve. And I think if we don't understand perspective, it's just like when you're having a relationship with somebody in the community and you're out talking about some perceived challenges maybe they have in the policing realm. understanding their viewpoint, their past, what they think about, and then saying, well, here's how we do this and how we do that. How do we come together to better understand our roles, and how can we be cooperative in this? The same concept goes within our own siloed areas within a city or a county or local government. It's just having the conversation first to say, here's what I want to accomplish. What steps can we take to shorten some things, to do some things different, and how open are we to that process to ultimately come to the same goal? And Nicole, I'm curious what you think about this one.
Yeah, I love the question. I will fully admit I have been a difficult HR manager to work with, right, or HR director. So I love the question, and I couldn't agree more that at the end of the day, the goal is to be clear and have direct conversations so that we can get to the same goal. Several years ago, I read a blog by Seth Godin. He's one of my favorite authors, but he had a blog, and at the end, it said, are you trying to prove a point, or are you trying to make a difference? And I think that when we get stuck in our own ways, or stuck in, we have to do it this way, we're trying to prove a point, and we're trying to tell the other departments or tell the PD, you don't know how hard it is to work in HR, you don't understand why we have to do it, but that truly isn't making a difference, right? We just continue to hit roadblocks, and we continue to have the same results. And so I think if we can kind of shift our lens to say, my goal here is to make a difference, we are more open-minded and we'll hear the other side, and then truly kind of come together to meet those goals.
I love that quote. There's a lot we could all learn from that, I think. So we have a couple minutes left, and those were our only questions for now. So I just wanted to give you both a chance. Do you have any final insights, takeaways that you would like to share with our audience today?
Sure, I'll go first on this one. I would just kind of like to wrap up that all of the things that we've talked about today all relate to your agency's reputation, right? The candidate experience, how we're communicating with the candidates, how efficient we are with our processes, if we have outdated tools, all of that impacts our recruitment, because word of mouth with candidates is huge. And whether they have a really great experience or whether they have a terrible experience, they are going to talk about it, and that impacts your recruitment efforts going forward. So just be mindful as you're kind of reevaluating your recruitment process and how you do things or how you communicate with the applicant. Be aware of how that looks as an outsider and what that could do to your agency going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And you said a key word there. You said reevaluating. And sometimes, particularly in policing, we don't want to reevaluate something. And we have a set way of doing things, and it can be a little, cops hate change, and then they hate it when it doesn't change. That whole phrase that goes around. Well, what we don't want is sudden change, and what we want is evolutionary change that gets us to the next level. And as we become better and better on our side of the house, in being better police professionals, I think what we look at is really looking at things from the brand of policing. And just for clarity for everybody out there, when I say brand, I don't mean our patch or our badge in the police work. I mean what people think of when they see us. Like, why? Well, that's a great organization. Yeah, they're really good. Versus, yeah, I wouldn't want to work there. I mean, when people have this judgment or this thought of you, that's happened for a reason. And when we talk about people we're hiring, remember that outside view of us really does matter, because people won't go to a place where they know that there's a challenge with the reputation of the agency, or there's systems in place that just prohibit not only a good hiring process, but also growth and retention within the organization. But if you have somebody out there that's your brand ambassador, that goes out, and you've got that officer that's just passionate about their job, they are your best sellers. They're the people that will go out, and they will be the ones, as a chief, they will have 10 times more influence than I ever will with getting new people on, because they're passionate about their job. At the end of the day, when we talk with our partners at HR, I think if we come together to talk about, what that looks like specifically and go through that, I think we're just going to be so much better off in that way. So there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges, but unless we address those challenges and think a little differently, I'm not sure we're going to get any better. But I'm heartened, as always, to hear from you, Nicole, from your perspective, because you have such great insights, and it's a pleasure to see you again. And we appreciate y'all taking the time to jump on board with us today.
Yes, thank you both. So valuable, so insightful. We appreciate you and your time. Same to our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was wonderful to have you, and we hope to see you again. If you'd like to hear any more information from our executive advisors, any insights from them, Power DMS is actually hosting Fuel, which is a 2-day virtual summit on May 5th and 6th, where you can attend trainings and get industry insights, hear more from our executive advisors like Doug, and network with peers as well. So the registration page will be shared with you all and linked in the follow-up email for this webinar, as well as the recording and all the resources that you need for this. So keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it and hope to see you again. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.